Hey, what's up everyone? Aaron from Unison here. Today we're going to be talking about adding ear candy to your songs. And by adding ear candy to a song, you can make it more unique, more professional sounding, just make the overall energy just more cohesive and also reach a higher level too versus if you didn't add ear candy, the energy level would be a lot more lower. So we're going to be going over 5 different ways to add ear candy to your music and get your music reaching that professional level. Let's jump right in. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about today is automation. And now you can go and completely ignore the other 4 tips that I'm about to go over and only just do automation, and you can make a world of difference in your track by adding automation. What automation is just the manipulation of parameters being changed over time. And so by doing that, you can make your music sound much more organic, and you can just add these varying changes throughout time in your song that will just help it feel more organic, add a lot of movement to certain sounds, and it will kind of cover a lot of the ear candy stuff that I'm about to go over just by using automation. You can do so much with it. It's endless. So let's dive into Ableton here. Here I have a demo, but the main thing I wanted to show is I did some automation here on this bass line where I have the filter opening up over time. And by doing that, it kind of feels like the sound is like rising, getting louder, all the above. And so it kind of signals, that the track there's about to be a change happening or that the end of the section is about to happen. And so if we listen here, let's check it out. So here's my drop that I have. But I'm just going to focus right here where the automation is happening on this particular bass line. So let's take a listen. So as you can see, I do have some other effects here, but even before those effects kicked in, it sounded like, with the sound getting louder and opening up more, that there was already kind of like this signal saying that the section was about to end. And so by adding these additional effects here, it's just kind of like the cherry on top of what I've already added. So like I said, you can kind of manipulate any of these parameters and kind of just make a movement within your synths, your sounds, whatever it might be, even if you're using samples and just throwing audio effects onto the samples, you can manipulate anything to just create whatever your heart desires. I'll show one more example just inside of this same bassline sound here. So as you can see here, I did a little bit of movement at the very beginning of this second phrase here in the drop. And so it sounds like this. And so by doing that, I could just go and get rid of that. And so the bass line would just pretty much sound the same throughout. There wouldn't be any movement in it. And so, just sounds the same. And it could totally work. You can 100% do that if you feel that works for the style you're doing. But for me, I always like a little bit of ear candy, a little bit of change, a little bit of movement going on. And so just by adding that subtle movement, just on this bar right here, it just makes for some nice subtle change in the song as it progresses. The second tip I want to talk about today is using effect sweeps, risers, impacts, things like that. And I know that this one might be kind of an obvious one, but I've listened to a lot of producers' music and, like giving feedback to them. And it's pretty surprising that a lot of newer producers don't really implement these types of ear candy in their music. And so by adding these things, it can really help your song to, move forward in energy, keep it forward moving, keep the energy going, and to help kind of signify when changes are about to happen. It drastically helps your song in terms of progression all the way through. Now, I will say this definitely applies more to dance music. Kind of a lot of the things I'm talking about apply more to dance music. However, some of these things can be applied to other styles as well. But especially in dance music, effect sweeps and risers are used so much, but it definitely helps to keep the energy moving forward. So here in my effects group here, I have all these different risers happening. And so I do have these types of atmosphere sounds as well. And so in the group sounds like this. We have that. We also have this riser happening. And so this is another thing that kind of might tie into automation. Here on this synth here, I just have this, where is it? I go into MIDI control. Yeah, I have this pitch bend going on. And so I just went and made this sustained note, and it's going up in pitch, so it acts as a riser. And so I also went and did some reverb automation as well, but it makes for a great riser sound. And so in context, we have this riser, and this riser. And so it works great just all together. And so by using these things, right before a drop happens, or even transitioning into the next section of a drop, like say you're gonna have a switch up here, there's like maybe some different elements that are happening, or when you're signifying the end of your drop or the end of a certain section, throwing in some sweeps and some impact sounds like this can really help the song to just move forward and progress in a natural way without it feeling forced. And so, as you can see here, so I have the riser sound going up at the very last bar here in this section, and then introducing this new section here, I just have some type of impact. Now, as you can see here, I don't have this super crazy like impact sound, nothing that's super jarring. You want something to be more subtle, so it just kind of accents the section rather than kind of distracting from it. And so, you could have like bigger impacts when it's like the end. Like over here, I have this bigger impact signifying the end of the song. And so there, it kind of is like taking over the song. It's kind of become the main element, whereas here you just want it to be this kind of accompanying element. All right, so the third tip that I wanted to talk about is adding background atmosphere. And what that is you're kind of essentially, think of it like you have like a bed for your track. And so all of the main elements in your song kind of sit on this bed. And so what you're basically doing is you're adding this atmosphere that's kind of filling up sort of like the background of your track. And so if you just had the main elements, yes, it can feel very full, but by adding these additional sounds and elements, it can just add a lot more depth to your track. And so if we go over here and listen, I have just a couple. There's not too many in this particular example, but it can kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So I have some of the atmosphere sounds soloed out. So it sounds like this. As you can see, it's very subtle. A lot of it is filtered down with a low pass filter. There's a lot of reverb happening. It's just very subtle. Nothing is really distracting from the actual main elements. So if we play everything in context with the intro here, it sounds like this. So as you can see, if I were to take all of those away, it would just be this bass line sound here happening and a couple of risers. But by adding these extra sounds here, it kind of adds a little bit of extra ear candy, just some interesting kind of things happening in the beginning. And same with over here in this kind of part post this drop, sounds like this. And And so again, if I were to take all those elements away, it would just be the bass line happening and the drums up here. And so again, by adding these little sounds, it's just very subtle additions that can definitely help the track to sound a lot more interesting and just keep the listener's ears perked up when they're listening. Next thing I want to talk about is vocal candy. And so, even though this is a EDM dance music track, whatever you want to call it, um, a lot of people definitely do resonate with music more when there is some type of vocal. It gives them something to sing, something to hum, anything like that, anything that helps a listener connect with the music more. It's always good to add that in there. And so by adding vocal candy, it not only makes your track more relatable, but it also just is nice ear candy as well. So again, there was a little bit of that vocal atmosphere happening in the beginning. I had these filtered down vocals happening here that were just chopped up and such there. But then over here, we get into something that has, it has a little bit of that melody there as well. You can definitely use things that actually say words, but in this particular context, the song is a bit more minimal. I just kind of liked these vocal chops that come from one of the Unison artist series, and I just dropped those in there, and it worked really well for the context of the song. So, in context of all the elements and everything, it sounds like this. We'll start from the build. So yeah, very subtle in this particular example, but definitely add little short phrases or just like you have like your typical kind of chants that you might hear in a lot of music, or sorry, in a lot of dance music, like the hey and the what, like things like that. Just adding things like that is definitely a nice thing to add, even if it's subtle like that. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is try and have something happening like a variation or a fill or some type of effect happening every 4 to 8 bars. And what I mean by that is here we have, there's 4 beats if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's 4 bars here with a total of 16 beats. So every 16 beats or every 8 beats here, have some type of variation happening. And so as you can see here, there's something happening after 16 beats here, 16 beats here, etc., etc., etc. And so by doing that, you're keeping the song interesting and there's just a lot of variation happening. And so, I also have down here, there's like this effect happening. There's also up here in the drums, there's this clap sound that's happening every 16 beats as well, and so on and so forth. So by doing that, you're keeping everything just like there's just variation happening that's breaking away from the main sound, which is just repetitive. So if we listen, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And so basically, I have it at the end of each of these phrases. So basically, a musical phrase is just like an idea, and then once it reaches the end of the idea, it will go and repeat, or it might go and change into a different phrase. And so at the end of the phrase, there's kind of like this response. So you might have heard of call and response. And so this might be the call, which is the bass line. And then the sound at the end is the response. And so by having that kind of discourse, you're almost like having this conversation happening with your music. And so if you think about it like that, then it's kind of like, okay, you don't want to have just one person talking the whole time. You want to have at least two people talking, or maybe you might have three people, where it's like, you might have the bass line, the vocal sound, the clap, or some type of drum fill or other type of fill. And so you're having all these elements work together, which is making your song a lot more interesting, and there's a conversation happening in the song. If you like the sounds that are being used in today's demo, a lot of them come from the Unison artist sample packs. You can pick them up on their website. There will be a link down below in the description. Outside of that, if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment for any feedback, any thoughts, things that you might use for ear candy. And as always, leave a thumbs up if you like the video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.